Voice by David Dunwoody, as read by Tonia Brown. Why? Stephen jerked awake and lay frozen in the dark, listening intently. The apartment was silent, but he knew something had stirred him. It sounded uncannily like the voice of his ex-wife. Why? He stiffened. It was her. But it couldn't be. She was halfway across the country, as far from him as she could afford to be, and she wouldn't come back. Would she? Lying flat, holding himself as still as fear would allow, he rolled his eyes down towards the bedroom doorway, a black void from which the falsetto voice had emanated. It wasn't that he feared Sarah, but the idea of the woman standing in his home in the middle of the night, crying. It seemed crazy. It was crazy. And if it was real, surely it was the precursor to something much worse. Quietly, and with as little movement as possible, he slipped out from beneath the bed covers and crept towards the door, at an angle, so as not to alert her. He reached into the hallway and flipped on the light. There was no one there. He had a clear view all the way to the living room and kitchenette. There was only the bathroom, the closed door on his left, and as he stood there in bare feet on the icy carpet, clad only in his briefs, hunched slightly as he listened, he heard the voice again, and it was coming from that room. No! The pitch of the strained cry was exact, just like that night, the last night, when he told her it was over and pushed her sobbing, protesting form out the door. Out to where, he had not known, or cared. She had family to help her out. He had nothing but the grating routine of their loveless marriage. Rid of her, he was without anything at all, and happy at that. Stephen grasped the bathroom doorknob and slowly twisted it. There were no sounds at all from within, no shuffling, no breath, nothing. It was as if he had been roused from bed by a memory rather than Sarah's actual return. Something about that resonated in him, and he grew colder. But he opened the door and peered inside. Empty. At least save for the shower, which had its curtain drawn. He flicked the light switch by the sink and whispered, "Are you there?" No response. He entered the room. The tile was colder than the carpet, making his toes curl. His fingers were already knotted into shaking fists. He knew the voice was real. Where was it coming from? He reached, trembling, for the shower curtain. If she was here, and in there, then there was no rational explanation. She was here to hurt him. God, he would have never thought she had it in her, but maybe he'd finally pushed her that far. Jesus, God, she could be right there, mere feet from him, separated only by a thin sheet, with a knife or a gun in her hands. Stephen raised his other hand over his head, ready to strike, as his fingertips brushed the vinyl. "Stephen!" He nearly jumped out of his skin. The strange falsetto had a tinny vibration to it. It was the vent cover, affixed to the wall above the toilet, rattling as the voice came through it. Stephen ripped the curtain back and stared at the empty tub. "Why, Stephen?" The voice was coming through the vent. He leaned in close to the grimy plastic cover, thoughts racing. Was the voice in the wall? Upstairs? In another apartment? The roof? What? Why? Why? He grabbed either side of the cover and tugged it. It came away with little effort, revealing a fan caked with black crud, behind which was a narrow duct that curved upwards. The whole thing was filthy, and a musty odor struck Stephen's nostrils. And something scrabbled up in the ductwork. He cocked his ear toward the open vent. There it was again, a light scratching. The bugs that infested this place. The thought of them clustering up here was nearly unnerving enough to make him forget the voice. Then, "You hurt me!" His head was almost right against the fan, and this time he heard the voice. He distinctly picked out several different tones. It was a chorus of tiny voices, coming together in that odd falsetto which sounded almost like Sarah. Almost. But it was not her. It was an imitator. Imitators. No, she would never have come back. And now that he heard the voices clearly, they were not her own. This was a separate matter, for which there was a rational explanation. Reaching for the fan switch, He turned it on. The vent spat black flakes in his face as the fan came to life. He spun away. For a second he thought the insects had come spraying out at him. Disgusting! More crud shot out, but he let the fan run, thinking it might somehow stifle the voices. If they knew he was awake, maybe they would fade away and restore the normalcy he expected of the waking world. After a few minutes he turned the fan off. The tile was littered with dark flakes that had come off the duct walls. He shook a few bits from his feet. "You hurt me!" The voices grew in volume, becoming unnatural as they did so. There was a buzzing underneath it all, a buzzing and scrabbling, and he started to think that maybe they were the damn bugs themselves. Blood-curdling, he threw open the cabinet door beneath the sink and rifled through its contents. Had to be something he could spray up here. He knew he didn't have any insect killer, but there was Windex, bug killer for poor people. He snatched the half-full bottle and twisted the nozzle open. "You hurt me! Stephen!" "Shut up!" he growled, and shot several streams of the blue fluid into the vent. It drummed against the ductwork. The voices grew louder. "Stephen!" "Shut up! Go away!" He tore the top from the bottle and sloshed its contents into the vent. A storm of black, buzzing things showered over him. He threw the bottle with a sharp cry, flailing his arms about as the things, big, heavy bugs, bounced off his head and scrambled over him, their wasp-like drones filling his ears. And then they were on his ears, pushing their mandible and swollen heads inside and shrieking, "You hurt me!" He stumbled back into the door. It slammed shut and he fell onto the tile, thrashing madly. They were all over him. They were stinging. His face a rictus of pain, he screamed with all he had, but there was no sound to be heard in his head. No sound but the voices. "Why?" All the feigned human emotion left the cries, and they became an alien noise, little more than the frantic buzzing of insects acting out the anger and anguish they had been imprinted with. The years of Sarah sitting in here, on the toilet, sobbing and pleading, whether he was there to hear it or not. Sarah, irrepressible, who was never really gone. He beat his head against the floor. His eyelids were swollen shut, and he felt tiny legs clinging to the orbs of the eyes themselves, felt this hot needle of a stinger. His head grew thick and heavy, and he was only vaguely aware when they poured into his mouth. Still he heard the voices. It was all he heard, until he didn't hear anything at all.